Whereas you go back to Martin Luther, and Martin Luther turns out to be an immoral disaster, right? A hateful, narcissistic, vile, proud man. And yeah, he's the figurehead. Where do you go after that? He founded the church. That's a 16th century innovation. So anyway, Arianism. So 4th century Arianism. This is a mix of adoptionism and logos theology, right? So they wanted to make Christianity more palatable to pagans by giving Christ every honor except co-equality with the Father. Because in the pagan realm, they didn't have this belief, right? That man could become God, right? Well, man wanted to become God, but the idea of God becoming man, this was completely backwards to these pagans. Do I have an issue? Have you read Chrysostom's discussions on Jews? Have you actually read the hate-filled, vile comments Chrysostom has made about Jews? Read them. Take a moment to have a look at what Chrysostom has said about Jews. Unless these are all fake reports, Chrysostom was a hateful bigot when it came to writing about Jews. And I don't mean, I'm not very happy with Jews because, they don't believe in Jesus. The guy took a very Martin Lutherish view of Jews, and Martin Luther's final words, final written and final known statements on Jews was, we should have killed them all. Okay? So Chrysostom kind of leans rather in that direction, let's just say. Kind of leans in that direction. So, Christ brings a sword. I don't need a man to tell me what the Bible clearly says. I'm saved by faith alone. Actually, no, you're just making it up as you go along, because your understanding of Scripture is the equivalent of Scripture. As Martin Luther said, every Christian is his own pope and own church. So, now, I read the Bible, I disagree with you. You read the Bible, you disagree with me. One of us is wrong. Definitely, someone is wrong. And also, Martin Luther, Calvin, and all of these, well, first of all, if you're a Lutheran, you follow Luther. That's very simple. Your tradition is based on Luther's interpretation. And all of these ideas are based on Luther. My opinion, yes, so is your opinion irrelevant. And as they say goodbye to the camera. Cheers, buddy. Have a nice day. Okay, now, moving on. They wanted paganism to be more acceptable. Sorry, they wanted Christianity to be more acceptable to pagans. So this was a revision of Christianity simply to be more like the pagans, to make it more accessible widely to, So Arianism presented Jesus as a replica of God created at Bethlehem. And the Catholic teaching, though, emphasizes the eternal existence of the Trinity. So now, only one of these can be correct. Understand, only one can be correct. Anything else has to be wrong. That is simply logic. That is just how logic works. Now, Arianism used slogans. They were very, very good with language. They used songs and they used catchy slogans to spread their beliefs. And these like little memes caught on. Arianism allowed pagans to view Jesus in a similar way to their own half-human demigods. And paganism, so only paganism perhaps displayed greater diversity of thought and religious ideas than Gnosticism or nonsense, right? Nonsense groups lacked a common structure, and often pagan groups also lacked a common structure, but there's certain parallels between them, right? So nonsense groups lack a common structure, and they lacked a canon of scriptures, and they often disagreed on key issues, which made them very difficult to identify. But there are parallels where these things hang together, right? So now, Irenaeus, the Bishop of Lyon, right, who lived from roughly 140, 150 to 200, who's the most famous of the 2nd century church authors, he wrote, "Since they, the Gnostics, differ so widely amongst themselves, both as respects doctrine and tradition, and since those of them who are recognized as being most modern make it their effort daily to invent some new opinion and to bring out what no one ever before thought of, it is a difficult matter to describe all their opinions." Now, here's my question. Does that sound similar to Protestant creeds and sects that contradict? That they differ widely amongst themselves, both as respects doctrine and tradition. And they make it their effort daily to invent some new opinion and to bring out what no one had ever thought before of. He's implying here that church doctrine was effectively well established around that period, or at least certain doctrines were well established. The church had to do things like create the Nicene Creed in response to it, had to refine its language, refine its doctrines, the description of existing doctrines, in response to these attacks by these heretics. So, but there was an established universal church. Historical Christianity, welcome, Anne E.